In an overlooked episode from the War for Independence, rumors in the Continental Army implied a possible coup against the Confederation Congress. In the end, tensions were quelled only after a grand appeal to republicanism and moderation. In this video, I'll explain. In October of 1781, the Continental Army, with support from the French military, defeated Britain in Yorktown, ending a prolonged siege. Even so, the war did not formally end until years later, and diplomacy between the British Crown and American states became a lengthy endeavor. During this time frame, soldiers in the Continental Army remained in the field, while British redcoats continued to occupy New York City. Most Continental soldiers earned a paltry sum for their services, and were often paid in depreciated currencies. In 1780, however, Congress passed a resolution granting all Continental officers a pension amounting to half of their regular pay for life. By 1783, financial woes had consumed the country. Without an enforcement mechanism of any kind, Congress struggled to collect requisitions from the states. In early 1781, an attempt was made to amend the Articles of Confederation to grant Congress the power to impose a tariff in order to raise revenue. The scheme, offered by Thomas Burke of North Carolina, would have permitted Congress to tax imports at a rate of 5%, but it was never to be. After Rhode Island categorically refused to ratify the amendment, its passage became hopeless, as the consent of all 13 states was required to amend the Articles. After the failure of the amendment, Congress was largely powerless to raise revenue, and remained politically divided on the issue of military pay. Prominent nationalists such as Alexander Hamilton thought that the Articles were fundamentally flawed, rendered impotent and unstable by a failure to generate revenue and centralize political authority. As Hamilton wrote, "The fundamental defect is a want of power in Congress. The Confederation itself is defective and requires to be altered. It is neither fit for war nor peace." A power to impose taxes, Hamilton reasoned, was the proper remedy to the financial woes affecting the military and the government in general. Pennsylvanian Robert Morris, primary financier of the war, sought to suspend military payments as a cost-saving measure that would ensure the survival of the young republic. Still, soldiers posted in Newburgh, New York had not been paid in 8 months, and those that could were funding many of their own expenditures. At this point, some rumblings within the army called for forceful action against Congress, extending even to the possibility of a counter-revolution or armed coup. Voices that were less radical suggested refusing to disband until the demands were met. All in all, restlessness among the ranks grew to a striking degree. The disgruntled group of officers sent Alexander McDougall, a popular captain in the Continental Army, to bring their petition to Congress. The officers had 2 basic demands: pay the army and fund their pensions. If the latter could not be accomplished in the immediate future, a one-time payment of satisfactory value would suffice. Negotiations remained at a standstill as Congress mulled what to do, but urged McDougall to request that the Army remain cooperative while remedies were debated. Instead, McDougall sent a letter to Henry Knox, asking him not to lose a moment preparing for events, possibly signaling an aggressive posture. Another high-ranking officer, Major John Anderson, implied that the Army should send Congress a more threatening ultimatum. In January of 1783, Robert Morris resigned from Congress in the midst of the controversy, shocking the government and causing some to assume his involvement in the Newburgh plot. Around the same time, Hamilton and other nationalists such as Gouverneur Morris hoped to use the heightened tensions to their political advantage. In a series of letters to Knox and Commander-in-Chief George Washington, Hamilton suggested that the Continental Army defy the civil authority to exacerbate civil strains, and in effect, convince the states to give Congress the taxing power he desired. This, he thought, would be the first step in a plan to convince the states to adopt a more nationally oriented system. Going to extreme lengths, Hamilton pressed Washington to threaten military force against Congress. With firmness, Hamilton wrote, "The Army's influence may operate on those weak minds which are influenced by their apprehensions more than their judgments. Washington," he wrote, "should take direction of the Army to add weight to the applications of Congress to the several states." Nevertheless, Washington rebuffed Hamilton. "I shall pursue the same steady line of conduct which has governed me hitherto," he wrote. Washington warned that introducing the Army would only excite jealousy and bring on its concomitants. After learning of a planned gathering of dissatisfied officers, Washington took matters into his own hands. On March 15th, Washington confronted the unrest directly. Making a grand appeal to republicanism, he urged the unruly officers to adopt a moderate course. He begged the forces to resist those who held any specious pretenses to overturn the liberties of our country and who wickedly attempt to open the floodgates of civil discord and deluge our rising empire in blood. Washington promised that Congress would address the grievances of the officers and implored the men not to take any measures which, viewed in the calm light of reason, will lessen the dignity and sully the glory they had maintained throughout the war. At one point, Washington struggled to read his speech to the crowd, announcing that he had grown gray and now nearly blind in the service to his country. At that moment, many soldiers realized the sheer amount of personal treasure and health Washington himself had sacrificed for the cause of independence. Due to his impassioned plea, any remaining conspiracy collapsed right then and there. By all accounts, it was a defining moment for Washington and the future of the young republic. In the end, Congress pursued a settlement that took the form of three distinct policies. First, the Continental Army would officially disband in April of 1783. This step quashed any possibility of an armed counter-revolution and stabilized the existing government. Second, Congress would propose another amendment to raise revenue through foreign trade. Like the previous attempt to add a tariff power, this plan failed yet again when Rhode Island refused to accept the taxing authority for a second time. Third, Congress would pass a measure to pay the officers at a commuted rate of 5 years of full pay instead of what had been promised back in 1778, half pay for life. Even though the solution broke previous agreements regarding pay, the immediate lump sum payments ended most of the remaining hostilities among the officers. Ultimately, the Newburgh Conspiracy should be viewed as a notable but underappreciated event that shaped the course of the United States. Because of the ultimate solution, there would be no threat of a standing army or an armed insurrection against Congress. Additionally, Washington's commitment to republicanism over military coercion catapulted his popularity among the masses. In my book, Compact of the Republic, I explained how debate over the Articles of Confederation led to the creation of a brand new constitutional system. If you want to check that out, I'll leave a link to it in the show notes below. And in addition, I'll also include links on the best works on the Newburgh Conspiracy. Thank you for watching this episode of History in a Nutshell. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos.